discussants who are here today to provide some expert feedback. With that, I turn it over to Team POLITIC. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Alex, and I'm here with Adrian, Mary, and another Alex to be presenting for all of Team POLITIC today. So to give you all an overview of what we'll be discussing, we'll start by explaining how research addresses current trends in data analysis, followed by an explanation of our database creation and methodology. We'll conclude with the results of our experiments, limitations of our findings, and implications and future directions for other researchers. So to start, what's Team POLITIC about? One of the current trends that we've heard about nowadays is globalization, which is the interdependence and permeation of other world cultures economically, politically, socially, and technically. So if you think of international trade, immigration, technology transfers, and media, those are all examples of what we're talking about. So it's not only important for us to understand other people's opinion of the United States abroad, but also how we perceive other countries here in the United States. However, our views of other cultures is limited by what's available to us and what's publicized, which can be shaped by political environments. So if you think of the book Kite Runner, it rose to be a New York Times bestseller for 2 years. It rose to critical acclaim, and it's on a film adaptation. But why this book when there are billions of others out there? Arguably, it was posted post 9/11 and gave us an insight into Afghanistan, and because it posed a view with harsh conditions, it helped to provide a rationalization for the war at the time. So we kind of can see how globalization could affect us, but how do we actually study it or quantify it? And that's where big data comes in. So big data just kind of means databases that are too large or have too big of a volume for us to analyze it using traditional methods. So we can't really read through all of these articles or just run simple statistics. And you can also glean additional information aside from just the data collected. So think of patterns, trends, or intersectionalities that were previously undetectable. So again, think of like Twitter and topics that trend, those kinds of things that happen today. Another key aspect of big data is the velocity at which it can travel. So how quickly it can spread to other countries or reach other people, and just the rate of growth. So you can see here that it's set to increase exponentially through 2020 and beyond. The last component is the variety of data available to us. We can all think of numerical types of data that are collected, such as imports and exports, rainfall, temperature, hard numbers. Well, how do we measure things like text or ideas, opinions, relationships between topics? How do we get a more complete picture of that? And that's where the digital humanities come in. It's a relatively new field that combines computational methods and figures out how to apply them to more disciplines in the humanities. It allows for quantitative scientific analysis of subjects that were previously only qualitative in nature before the advent of big data. So the way that we chose to approach it was to utilize a case study model to kind of see how some of these digital humanities tools can be applied and be used to answer more qualitative questions. Specifically, we chose Russian literature review at the turn of the 20th century for 3 main reasons. One, the Russian Revolution and the establishment of a communist government has provided a clear relationship and kind of a really interesting before and after model to explore. 2, for copyright reasons and just for convenience of having an entire period to reflect on, this time period worked out great. And 3, periodicals really capture what was publicized throughout the United States and are better able to show us what was widely circulated, what was critically acclaimed, and what was kind of published in a time-sensitive manner. So our research question is kind of general. So how can we use these public data analysis tools to analyze large data sets in a qualitative field study? And then we predict that we'll be able to use them to not only quantify, but also predict our relationships and our perceptions with Russia within certain political environments during that time. So to start, we needed to create a database to analyze. We looked at the data retrospective, which is the most comprehensive collection of periodicals in our time period of interest. We ran searches for all articles relevant to Russian literature and literary figures. These articles existed in print and microfilm form, so we had to kind of work together to convert them into a form that was consistent and digitally readable by our tools. So we used scanners and then optical character recognition software, or OCR, to convert the raw images into readable text. Comprehensive studies of commercially available OCR place the accuracy between 80 and 95%. And the consistency of our formatting is important because our results are only as important as the data set that we have to work off of. In sum, our set came out to about 1,013 articles. You can kind of see some variance from year to year. However, since we had at least 10 articles per year, we were able to run the statistical models that we needed. And with that, I'll turn it over to the other Alex to explain our first round of experiments.
Thank you, Alex. All right. So the next step of the process was the data analysis. So once we have our data set completed, the challenge is to see what actual information can we gain from this big data set. So to do this, we decided to employ two different machine learning techniques. The first being text classification through the use of Weka, and topic modeling through the use of mapping. Now, the overall goal for both these techniques is very simple. They both seek to label and annotate every single article in our database with useful information. Now, the type of information it can label and the methods in which it finds this information is very different. So the first one we decided to use was Weka. So Weka is under the technique of text classification. And so the basic objective of text classification is you want to be able to sort each article into a variety of predetermined categories. Now, in theory, this can be done by any person. They could read an article and then decide whether or not it belongs in one category or another. However, when you start to have hundreds of thousands of articles, this becomes very impractical. And that's where Weka comes in. Weka generates a predictive model which will be able to make these decisions for us. The next point is that it is a supervised machine learning. And what I mean by that is it uses a training set in order to generate this predictive model. So essentially what we did is we determined what were the subjects that we were interested in the articles. And then we read a handful of articles, 238, and decided and categorized each of those articles based on the issues that we were concerned about. This data set was then used, or this training set was then used by Weka to generate its predictive models. As you can see here, we have the process of first developing the training data. We then have a pre-processing section, which essentially means you take all of the words in our data set and organize them into a cleaner data so that Weka can make a better a model. And of course, this model is then what we use to get our predictive accuracies. So I just want to take a quick look at our training data. So POLITIC sat together and we came over 16 questions that we thought were interesting to us. These ranging from questions that were solely like, what is the Russian author that is being discussed in this article? To ordinal questions, which were, what is the sentiment towards that author in this article? And then even binary questions, where simply, is there a certain issue present in the article? Up on the screen, you'll see a few examples of these questions. For 238 articles, we answered all 16 questions, which culminated in a spreadsheet, or a much longer spreadsheet than what you see above. So Weka will take these answers, and they'll incorporate it within the pre-processed data file, and then create its predictive model. So these predictive models end up culminating in a thing called a decision tree. So here I have a portion of the decision tree for our radical politics present in the article. And so we see a lot of interesting things that appear in this decision tree. First, all of the words are in fact what they call attributes. And these attributes were chosen on their ability to separate our database. And so it's very understandable why the top word is in fact revolution. That revolution would be a word that would separate our data on the issue of whether or not radical politics was present. There are a number of other interesting things you can notice is sometimes the decision trees are revealing in themselves. You see up here the word, excuse my pronunciation, Abraham, which, from what we found out, was actually a translator that lived during this time period. And it's something like this that you generally would not have found out simply by reading. It's quite curious that our models decided to pick this word as a word that is decisive in this topic. So with these decision trees, it ends up creating a predictive model that has a certain predictive accuracy. And so now through all of our different trials, for all the different questions that we decided for our Weka trials, we had a variety of results. The one above us, radical politics, was actually quite successful. And so what you see here in the bar graph is our answer to the question, is radical politics present? And so you see there are 75 yeses and 153 no's. And the J48 is the classifier we chose for Weka. And it ended up with a 75% predictive accuracy. So 75% of the time, it was able to predict whether or not it was under either category. Now, the question is, what do I compare this to? Well, WECA has a baseline accuracy, which is a 0R classifier. Now, the 0R classifier takes the majority answer, in this case no, and says, what if I said no for every single article? How effective would my prediction be? And in that case, you only get a predictive accuracy of 67%. And so what we can use from some calculations, we calculated an ROC area, and we determined that a 0.74 over a 0.5 for our model, which shows that there is a significant increase in predictive power. So the conclusion of our WECA process, we found a whole bunch of interesting things. One, we definitely think that this is a successful tool. But along with that, other than simply its predictive power, there are a whole bunch of interesting insights it gives us based on the decision tree. Finding different words that normally we would not have thought as a big deciding word for whether or not a issue was very enlightening. So now I'm going to pass it off to Manpreet, and he'll talk about our second machine learning technique.
And that is topic modeling. So topic modeling that we ran through Mallet, a program package, is essentially a tool that allows us to discover themes or the topics that lie in the data set, and it tags each document with a distribution of the topics. So, essentially, this is an unsupervised machine learning tool. It mines the data set and it clusters words into topics. It is linked, the inputs that you have to put in are fairly small compared to WECA, in that essentially you need the data set text and you need to specify the number of topics you want as an output. The specific type of topic modeling that we ran is latent Dirichlet allocation. Now, primarily, LDA asserts that the topics are unobservable events, unobservable data, and they make up a hidden structure of the data set text. That is to say that they cannot be understood by simply reading through the text. You see this diagram. Starting from the right-hand side, you see a little histogram. This is assuming that there are 3 topics in the model. And we see that each bar is a different height, and this represents the proportion. The proportion is saying that the words in this topic are different in the sense that the lower it is, the less these words will appear. The occurrence rate will be lower for these words than for the rest of the text. And we see that these topics are linked to the words. So LDA goes through and it goes word by word, and it looks at how frequently does this word occur. So it matches this occurrence rate to the occurrence rate of a topic, the closest one. And essentially that pairing will produce the words that are in the topic. And we see this is an example of the output. We see we have 4 topics here, and essentially those are the strings. And for each topic, we have multiple words, and those are what comprise the topic. There are many, many more, but these are some of the first ones that are here. And also, the second table shows us that for each article, we have the distribution of topics that are attributed to that document. So, from there, you ask the question, how do we come up with the number of topics to choose? And in literature, the best way, or not necessarily the best, but a simpler way to do so is cross-validation. That's just a fancy term for saying we guess and check. We go through and we pick one number of topics, and then we choose another number of topics, and we compare them in order to see which one produces the best understanding of the text. What kind of themes appear? Do they make sense? From here, we wanted to see how topics would change over time. Because we wanted to link this to Russian historical events. So we wanted to see if they would react to them or not. And what we chose, the blue line represents here, is a topic that does not change very much over time. It's relatively constant. It's as a theme of literature. And given that our data set was created on having a Russian literature theme, or that was the criteria, It makes sense. It is an intuitive, it's intuitively reasoned that that would be constant. The next one, though, is one that represents Russian Revolution, the red line. Now, we would think that this would not appear before any of the events that lead up to the Russian Revolution occur. So basically, we see that it's completely flatlined before then, and around 1917, it starts to spike very much. Essentially, this validates our use of topic modeling and showing how the American reception mirrors the Russian events. But this is a visual interpretation. This is not objective. So what we wanted to do is create a statistical method that we can use to analyze the topic distributions in order to come up with predictive models, unlike the ones in the Weka, to basically give us a similar understanding of was the Russian Revolution beginning to occur or not. So the tools that we used, the methods, were factor analysis and stepwise binary logistic regression. Factor analysis is a useful tool because in a regression model, you want to limit the noise, the error. And one way to do that is to limit any correlated variables, reduce the collinearity between the variables. And essentially, factor analysis groups together the topics that we produced and groups them into factors. Basically, most correlated topics will be attributed to one factor. So we've reduced the number of variables we can input into our regression model. This is a technique that's very widely used. Google uses it for its consumer data management regression model creation. And the next one is what we really use to create these are our predictive models, the stepwise binary logistic regression, SBLR. So essentially what this says is that first of all, the dependent variable is going to be a 1 or a 0. So this is very useful for any kind of question that we want to ask regarding a yes or no answer. With this, the logistic aspect of it allows us to drop many of the assumptions that we would need to pose for a linear model. And that's very useful because it's hard to prove normality and heteroscedasticity throughout the data. And what's also very useful is that we have a forward selection basis, a stepwise forward selection basis, which essentially goes through and creates a model that has 0 variables in the beginning. And then it'll add another variable. And it'll say, is this the variable that adds the most accuracy to our model? And it'll keep on doing this until it finds that any additional variable does not increase the accuracy significantly. To go over how we use this, I'll hand it over to David.
Alright, so I'm going to talk to you guys about 3 different experiments we ran using the stepwise binary logistic regression and particle patterns. So the first experiment we ran was the sea change model. Our second is a crisis error model, and the third is an experiment to verify the results from that. So in the sea change model, we were thinking about how we can capture a change in reception due to a potentially cataclysmic event or date. We hypothesized that using a historically significant date of 1920, which is around the end of the Russian Revolution, we can predict whether articles occurred before or after this cataclysmic date. So what we did was we created dummy variables. 1, if it's prior to 1920, and 0 if it's post 1920, which goes into this idea of the binary logistic regression that Andrew was talking about. So each dot on this graph is an article's predicted outcome variable. What we did was each article has factors associated with it. So those go into the model in order to determine the coefficients of the model. And then each article individually is a point on this graph. The green dots are articles that were written prior to 1920. The red dots are articles that were written after 1920. And as you can see, articles that were written prior to 1920 are predicted to be more likely to occur prior to 1920, and articles that were written afterwards are predicted to be less likely to occur prior to 1920, which is something that, which is strongly supports our hypothesis. Now, excuse me. So we interpret any article value greater than 0.5 to be an opportunity to say that an article is more likely to occur prior to 1920. From a baseline accuracy of approximately 55%, we're able to increase our accuracy by using a cutoff of 0.5 to 76%. Now, this graph on the right looks at, on a per year basis, the percent of articles that are predicted to occur prior to 1920. Again, we see prior to, in a shaded region, years that are prior to 1920, we have a high predicted accuracy that articles are occurring prior to 1920, and subsequently the same for post. So one issue with the sea change model is that gradual changes in language over time might cloud the accuracy of our model. So we thought about a bounded time frame between 1914 and 1920, which is a significant crisis period for Russia, so Russian Revolution and World War I. And so we include, each article has factors that are put into this model, and we see the outcomes for each article across the year. The greens being articles that happened during the crisis era, and the red being articles that occurred outside of the crisis era. And we again see that articles that occurred during the crisis era have a higher predicted value than articles outside of the crisis era. So using a cutoff of 0.5, which is the red line, we also see that by year there is an increased predicted accuracy during that time period of interest. And articles outside of the time period of interest, we're finding that they are very unlikely to predict that articles in those years are about the crisis period. So very briefly, I'll also talk a little bit about WECA results. So we ran topic modeling and regressions on WECA results, on the annotations in order to verify WECA results. And we found similar levels of accuracy between, we found similar increases in accuracy from the baseline to our predicted model using a topics model. And I'll hand it back over to Alex for some very quick closing remarks.
All right, so there's just a quick couple conclusions here. Sorry, I missed the time. Is it 1 minute? 2 minutes, sorry, thank you. So of course, there are a handful of future directions we would like to see this project go if it were to continue. The first is, there of course are a number of different questions, or an infinite number of different questions we can ask about this data. A whole bunch of different ways of categorizing and evaluating all the different articles. You can see just a few examples of maybe instead of having ones and zeros as crisis time versus not crisis time, maybe you're just really only concerned about the time leading up to a crisis. Or maybe you're more concerned with, well, what were the times that the United States had military soldiers in Russia? And I wanted to see what the articles were saying versus those time periods versus others. An endless amount of these questions could be continued in further research with these exact same models we've been using. The next very interesting prospect for this research is combining these two machine learning techniques. So far we've kept them pretty separate, but we believe that there would be a great improvement in predictive power if you were able to put them together. So basically what we do is in that data file that we have for WECA, if we can include all of the data we have now gotten from topics modeling, our accuracies we expect would increase. And so now in those decision trees, instead of just seeing words, you would also see topic 01. Maybe that leads left or right on whether or not an issue is within the article. And then finally, these techniques are not only just for our database. These are techniques that could be practiced and evaluated on a large number of different databases. And we think it would be very interesting to try different databases with different types of articles and different focuses. And so finally, our conclusion. So we set out 3 years ago to figure out if we could gain any information from a database such like this to see on American reception, and whether or not we can make any predictions. And as a group, we believe there, to some certainty, that was true. We were successful. The decision trees and the topics themselves offer a whole bunch of unique perspectives that we otherwise would not have anticipated. And then from these perspectives and the data themselves, we're able to generate these predictive models that have proven to have significant increases in predictive power. And this is a type of quantitative data which isn't as commonly used in the study of the as we would like it to be. And so finally, this is kind of the question that our group has kind of been asked since day one is, why should anybody else really kind of care? Who's going to spend the big bucks to want your research to continue? And so this was always kind of a challenge for us. But as we've completed this project, we really found that there's a clear-cut answer, is that this type of research has far-reaching capabilities even outside of academia. This could go into the public sector, this could go into the private sector. There are a whole bunch of different organizations that are going to want to be able to analyze big data in order to get very meaningful and powerful results. And just to give you a little bit of perspective, as we come into a little bit of current affairs, as we see Russia's movements over in Crimea and in the area, in Ukraine, the question is, how much of this can be predicted by the literature that is being put out there? And we as a group do not think it is too fantastical that somebody could be using these exact same models on databases that are being created right now, with all the articles referencing and discussion on New York Times, and a variety of other magazines and newspapers, and be able to see very similar trends. Now, how great would that be if I was to analyze this and was able to see the exact same pattern before World War I as we see right now in Crimea? This would be unique information that would be otherwise impossible to garner. And so that's why we're really excited about our project, and we hope you enjoy it. So we'll pass on that.
So we'd like to extend a quick thank you to our amazing mentor, Dr. Peter Malios, who's been unbelievably supportive. We'd also like to thank our librarians, Tim Hackman, who unfortunately couldn't be here today, but who are here today, our discussants, who are also amazing, and we're really looking forward to your feedback. We'd like to thank the Maryland Institute for Technology and the Humanities, who's provided support for us throughout the last 3 years, and the Foreign Literatures in America Project. And then finally, we'd like to thank the Gemstone staff and everything that they've done for us. So from there, I'd like to open up the floor for questions, starting with our discussants.
Introduce yourselves before the questions, that would be wonderful.
So I'm Peter Kaczynski. I'm assistant professor of history. I work on Eastern European and Western European history.
I'm Michael Isno. I'm an associate professor of English language and linguistics.
I'm Travis Brown. I'm one of the assistant directors at MIT, the Institute for Technology and Humanities.
I'm Peter Mallory, Associate Dean of Department.
I'm Natalia Bolzavita. I'm a graduate student and I study American and Russian literature and specifically Soviet period.
I didn't mean to be the one to start. Well, let me just ask a relatively simple question. So in the sea change experiment, you looked at the reception before and after 1920, and I was wondering if did you try choosing any other random years to see if you would end up with significantly different topics for those?
Yes, so there's actually a pretty long process before that. We started with 1917, and essentially what we did is we moved in increments of years, and we retested it every single time to see which year would give us the best predictive accuracy. And just at the end of our conclusion, we found out that 1920 was in fact the one that showed the biggest differences pre-post.
So, but 1917 wasn't a random year. That was a year you thought would also be a sea change. So I ran near like 1926, where there's nothing before or after. Would you mind talking?
Yeah, so we didn't do that particular experiment, but we did randomly assign every article a 1 and 0, which instead of giving us a cutoff here, would give us a random bag of articles, and we were not able to get any predictive power from this random bag of articles. So to some extent, there doesn't seem to be, we could do that experiment in the future. It wouldn't be too difficult to try every single year and see which is the best year that has the highest rate of factors. So I'm sure that, there may be other years that are just as good or have interesting pre-post values as well.
So I'll do one more question that a similar kind of experiment that I'd be interested in is looking at a corpus that is different but similar somehow. So looking at some collection of Google books or some collection from I don't know where, and seeing if you would find what would topics from a similar period or I don't know how you find the corpus, but what sorts of what would you expect about what the topics would look like? So would the revolution topic look anything like the revolution topic in your text?
Absolutely, and it's definitely a further direction that we could take or another research team could take. We chose Russian literature again for the reasons that it was full-time period that we could reflect on. It was a really interesting model. We had already kind of gotten a head start on it, so it was easy in that respect. But again, it would be really interesting to kind of carry that one out. A lot of the questions that we asked weren't necessarily just about revolutionary politics. We also asked, was gender a factor? Were race relations a factor? Gender of the author that wrote the article, a bunch of different things that could obviously apply to, other purposes as well.
Yeah, but the reason I asked the question is because it would be easy to do the same sort of thing again, but in order to find out what it means that you get these topics and this set of topics, so in order to interpret what you're getting in the topic modeling from this corpus, it would be interesting to see if you did a similar education to a different corpus, which you get.
Oh, the same exact words, the same topics.
Well, I'm sure you would get the same exact words, but would they be, would they even be similar?
So a comparison, kind of.
Yeah.
That would be excellent.
My first question was about the use of factor analysis in conjunction with topic modeling. So these are both ways of reducing the dimensionality of your data set. And so I was curious about what kinds of improvements you saw after you applied the factor analysis after the topic modeling as opposed to just lowering the number of topics that were out of the model to start with.
So one thing is that at least the tools that I was using would not allow me to use just the topics themselves because of this multi-linearity issue. So it was impossible to start to even run these experiments without that. That might just be the limitations of the tools that we were using. One thing that we did do, I don't know if I mentioned it, is include factors and the squares of factors to allow for changing marginal effects of each factor. And we did see that we ran these models with and without the factor squared and found that including factor squared increased the predictive accuracy and the R squared, the explained variance.
That was in we also ran it through a space test, and there was a comparison. We did topics and factors together. We did topics alone, and then we also did factors alone. And we did see that the significance values for topics alone was slightly lower than factors alone. And the same was true for topics and factors. But we ultimately just did factors alone because we felt that significance was really what we were trying to go for. And just adding, having the topics did give you the advantage of knowing specifically which topic was the most instrumental in predicting it, but the factor was still a better choice.
I just have one other quick question. So you mentioned at the beginning of the presentation that the quality of the OCR transcription would have an impact on your results. And so I was wondering, do you feel that the quality of the transcriptions that you got out of the OCR system were good enough for the analysis you were doing? Do you think if you had human-corrected transcriptions, would you get better or more reliable results?
It certainly did have errors. As we were scanning, actually Andrew and Dan were with me, and the three of us that managed OCR. There were definitely errors that came up and things that we could notice between the image and then the final text, like misspellings or words that weren't really words. So absolutely human interpretation would help. But kind of on this level, it's really difficult to read through all 1,000 articles and type in the text word for word. However, we found that since, our accuracy was, improved in the models, that we thought that the error kind of wasn't as big of a deal. We were still able to find results despite the error.
Thank you.
Well, I just wanted, the one interesting comment about that though is it was interesting how well our tools were able to deal with that. And that you often see in topics modeling, all of the words that weren't really words will end up thrown into one topic by themselves, which was really impressive for the tool to be able to do that. And then if you're watching carefully enough during the decision tree for radical politics, one of the words was NIHL, which would appear to me to be a misspelling of they shortened the suffix of nihilist. And it was still able to pick out something like that as an interesting point, even though it isn't the right spelling.
My questions are going to be a little bit different. I'm interested, I found this project to be absolutely fascinating. I'm coming at it from a little bit of a different angle, which is I'm thinking in terms of the heuristic power that your work might have for the humanities side, right? This is one of your points of departure. So, if I could just put this to you in the broadest possible terms, in terms of, and I encourage you to think, if you were sort of, to go to what you were saying at the end of your presentation, speaking to a panel that could award you a massive grant, and one of the people on the panel, me here, is a humanist with minimal background in digital humanities. I appreciate what you were saying at the end in terms of thinking about Crimea and the ongoing conflict right now. But if you think about the massive existing scholarship that's already out there in qualitative terms, for thinking about U.S. foreign policy toward Russia, history of Russian literature, history of American media, is there a way to incorporate at all the qualitative scholarship? And I know there's a section in here where you talk about using the qualitative scholarship to develop a timeline. But I mean in a more substantive way that can interact with some of your hypotheses. The qualitative scholarship from which you from the area from which you're drawing your data with the actual analytical model you follow.
So a quick comment that I have is we definitely see the opportunity to draw from that in our topics modeling and the experiments that we run with them. It was definitely an option, and one of the thoughts we're having is to draw from that information and that be our categories. Is that instead of just having a yearly situation, we might be able to look at an argument that a professor of humanities has made and see whether or not you could categorize the articles and see if there's a regression that you could have that was to predict how effective his statement about in humanities was.
I think just to build off of that, like a claim that is made in qualitatively in humanities, I think that there's definitely room for this quantitative approach to say, using a representative corpus, we're able to see proof of a change in reception over time. We're able to see a change before and after the Russian Revolution. America certainly appears to talk about Russia in a different way. And something we didn't touch upon in this presentation is sentiment analysis. We had annotated every article for its positive or negative sentiment. Well, we could see whether or not we could track specific authors over time, see if their sentiment towards Russia changes before and after certain events. We can look at specific newspapers changing sentiment over time before and after certain events. So I certainly think there's room for a quantitative look at sentiment, a quantitative look at these questions.
I think that makes a great deal of sense, and thank you for that answer. Let me just ask a follow-up about sentiment analysis. This jumped out at me when I was actually reading. It's a foregone conclusion that in most cases when you have subjective or qualitative work, sentiments expressed on a gray area, right? So if you make a statement along the lines of one that you made, which is some of this piece were totally positive, totally negative, that's something I would expect. Is that something you can account for heuristic?
So that is something that we did. We classified the articles as either positive, negative, or having a mixed opinion. It originally came from, I think, like positive, negative, no opinion, mixed opinion. But then we worked within our team. Each member of the annotation sub-team read the article and made that determination on their own, compared it within a pair, and then if there were answers still could be reached through, went back to Dr. Mallius, and he would also have to read the article. to kind of have the final say as to what the sentiment expressed was. So again, there's definitely room for more qualitative approaches to be incorporated in the quantitative aspects. It can definitely also be used to kind of substantiate like previous work, previous theories and fundamentals.
And just to build on that also, in terms of with the stepwise the binomial regression, we can have our ones be every positive article and our zeros be all other articles. So you can be able to say whether you can be able to test whether articles are positive or not positive. And so that would be one way to get around possible subjectivity or gray area, just to be able to test are these articles very positive or just not very positive. And I'm being told that we should open it to the floor for demo questions, so we'll be getting lots of time. Unless, yes. Or, do you want to ask one question first? Yeah, of course.
Okay, so I work with literature, and I was always thinking how the project can be implemented in the humanities, and I can certainly see many ways it can be. So my question is, you started with certain hypotheses as to the results that you're gonna obtain, and to a great extent, what you were hypothesizing was actually confirmed by the project. So my question is, what are the unexpected elements that you found in the course of the project?
Well, there are in fact a large number of unexpected outcomes that came throughout the whole project. And it actually really kind of helped us constantly reform our methodology. But just to give an example, it was really interesting and baffling when we first started running topics model. You would see that there would be a couple very clear ones which you would expect. You would expect a Dostoevsky topic. You'd expect a socioeconomic topic. You'd expect a Russian literature topic. But then you'd, for some reason, have a topic that was just about one book or even one poem. And the question is, now why, if the program only had 20 topics that it could allocate to all 1,000 articles we had, why would it choose to leave a whole topic just for one tiny little poem? And it's stuff like that which we kind of had to bounce around with and explain why would this be the case. And thinking about that really kind of pushed us to organize our data. That was one of the big things that I was.
I think another follow-up to Alex's answer was that we were a little surprised that the sentiment analysis didn't come out exactly as we had hoped. But kind of in future actions, we think that a larger sample size could also kind of account for that and help us to answer, positive versus negative, what are the sentiments being expressed throughout the time period in regard to Russia and their literary figures.
Okay, thank you. And also, I was wondering about the tools you use. Do you think they are sufficient for the analysis of such a large, massive amounts of data, or do you think still the human factor needs to be involved to a great extent?
I would say that ultimately there is an aspect of the human supervising these models and running these regressions. That's always going to be an aspect of data analysis. We try to keep ourselves as independent as possible from the actual regressions themselves, but it's very difficult to divorce the experimenter from the experiment. That's something that was a challenge for us throughout that is something that we think that we're able to do that more here than we can in a purely traditional qualitative study of the same region.
Thank you very much. It was very interesting reading.
Well, that's just the final point along the lines there.
You can save that thought, Alex, because you all will have an hour conversation. I think it will be a fruitful conversation with a lively discussion. Let's once again congratulate Team POLITIC.